we don't have anything else, we will go ahead and move on. Everybody bear with me. We are going to jump ahead to item number 5, discussion of community concern around interactions between Austin Police with U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement. Christy, Chelsea, can you all help me calling speakers?
Yes, Chair. We have 2 speakers for item 5. Kathy Mitchell, 3 minutes.
Good evening. I'm Kathy Mitchell, retired person. I live in D1. I'm going to take a moment and bore you by reading the 3 points that I have so that I be sure and make them. And then I want to elaborate on the last one. We are all seeing a great deal more imagery of ICE detentions here in Austin, moving towards downtown. So in recent days, we were seeing stuff southwest, and then we were seeing stuff north, and then northwest, and then northeast, and now we're seeing them closer to downtown. All that to say, I think there's plenty of evidence that both ICE is active right now and that Austin residents care about this and are pulling out their phones and they're taking pictures and they're taking videos, and we're going to know more in the coming days as all of that starts to filter out into the rest of us. So in this moment, there are a number of ideas that have been floating around, and I just kind of want to crystallize some of them so that it's all been laid out for discussion. The general orders have to be revised. I know, I hear rumor that is in process, a work in process. But for me, and this is just old retired lady speaking, the main thing that I think has to happen is a formula for supervisor approval in all cases. The kind of finer distinctions that we try to make when we say we can have supervisor approval for this, but we don't need it for that, simply opens the door for people who don't want to get supervisor approval to figure out how to wedge their incident into the right box. And so I think that's a very simple way for management to start wrapping its head around what's happening on the street. Number 2, I would like to see APD maintain and release a list of cases in which supervisor approval was granted with the criminal charge applicable to any person detained. In this city, where we are governed by the principles of freedom cities, ICE should not be, stopping and detaining people at random traffic stops, and certainly APD should not be helping them do that. And of course, we don't support detaining people without appropriate judicial warrants. But 3 is my last one, and yet some of you have heard me harp on this before. Management must immediately revise procedures for officers to self-assign their time when they're on patrol. Okay, I was going to talk about that, but now I am not.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Speaker. Amy Thompson, 3 minutes. It has to be done prior to the meeting.
Turned it off. Howdy, my name's Amy Thompson, and for those of you who may know me, I'm speaking today in individual capacity as a concerned citizen. And I appreciate your patience with me just calling out some things that I'm sure many of you here are aware of, but in the conversations that I've had with leadership at city, county, and state level in the last couple of months about some basic concepts regarding immigration law enforcement, I feel like there's a need to call this out at every public forum just so people understand the reality and the impact that it's having on your constituency. One, again, immigration law is administrative law, so our ICE is enforcing administrative law. They are not traditional law enforcement officers. They have no directive to protect and to serve. They are there to just enforce administrative law. And they're showing up with guns. That would be like an IRS auditor carrying a bazooka into an audit. It's intimidating, it's scary. It is the very definition of excessive force on the face of it. We increasingly see our neighbors limiting their movements and being scared and concerned for their safety and the safety of their children. And the reality is here in Texas, you guys are the cavalry. You're the only thing between us and a federal agency that is intent and consistently using excessive force, and we've seen the result of that in communities across the country. So I'm just here today to please ask you to keep that in mind as you develop the rules, and to consider using what you have at hand. Consider, for example, leveraging your own policies about excessive force rules, using your own officers and your own rules to protect citizens against excessive force by immigration enforcement. Also to the Commission and other city leaders to consider creative solutions and opportunities, such as, for example, public portals for folks to upload their evidence of ICE abuses to facilitate investigation by your attorneys general. That's being done in New Jersey right now, and I think it's get creative, please, and protect us. You're our only hope.
Thank you.
That concludes the speakers for item 5.
Okay. And so just so that we know how we're doing things, we are going to go ahead and open a discussion amongst the commissioners. Chief Davis, we had originally been told that APD would not be ready to speak to this item today and that they would be here in March, which is why we structured the agenda the way we did. Chief Davis is here, so we're going to take advantage of that so that she can, I'm assuming she
I
has
will be
some-
back in March as well.
Okay, I'm assuming that she has some things she'd like to share with us, and then we can open discussion amongst the commissioners after that.
Yeah, I just thought it was very important to come. Yes, I can only give an hour, but I wanted to stop by and speak to just the gravity, understanding what's going on, and certainly this is a situation that I cannot begin to feel and know what others are experiencing that are dealing with this on a daily basis. But what I can speak to is what we're doing. And Kathy, I'd like to answer some of your questions that you posed. So when it goes to the general orders, those are being revised, and they're being revised to add in the administrative warrant. In February of 2025, over 700,000 administrative warrants were put into the system by ICE. Those had not been there before. And so when an officer or when a person is being ran, those two warrants are very similar. It'll come up administrative warrant or a detainer. Call ICE, and it gives you a number to call for both of those calls. And so when we're talking about the incident where the mother and her 5-year-old daughter were deported and sent back to Honduras, that came from that. The officer was there investigating another crime, and when they running her, it came up as a administrative warrant. He called ICE, the officer did, and they decided to come and pick her up. And so as we're moving forward and we're looking at, okay, was this just a misunderstanding about what these two warrants look like? We have to talk about what they are to do and what I want as a chief for us as we move forward. And so it is certainly at that point when an officer does come up and they're holding someone, detaining someone, or investigating a crime only, and they come up with an administrative warrant, if they choose to call ICE, that will then be taken to a commander level. And so the idea of waiting for ICE, waiting any amount of time, we just do not have as an agency. We do not have time to wait for ICE to come pick up on an administrative warrant, a civil warrant, as a department. We have, over 300 officers short. We have calls holding. You talked about your time and what you're doing with your time. I would much rather you be on directed patrols and your time is managed that way, and you're taking priority 2s and 3s, which we know are holding a longer period of time. And so taking that in the discretion of the commander, who is at a higher level of authority, who also understands the overall mission, certainly from me and the executive team and what that is, I do feel that we'll take that out of the hands of the officers as far as seeing them waiting there. And so I think that also helps with Senate Bill 4. We're in compliance with Senate Bill 4 at the same time, where it's reasonable. So, Kathy, I think that revision will work. And at this point, Lee Rogers here, our Chief of Staff, will get notified, and we'll take absolutely into consideration maintaining and releasing of that. I know if that's a recommendation, we will certainly take a look at that and how that can be facilitated. I think transparency is the best way to go. There's no doubt about that. And then again, that self-assigned time, I think, again, looking at what my overall priorities are for this department, and it's crime prevention, it's community engagement, recruitment, retention, those type of things. That is not included anywhere in there, ICE. And we do not ask immigration status. That is nothing that we ask. And when it does come, ICE does not have, we don't even have communications with ICE. They're not on the same radio channel we're on. We don't know. So you were talking earlier about seeing APD officers with ICE, and that was a call they sent into communications that a car crashed into a building. And so as soon as our officers got there, recognized that they were not needed there, they cleared the scene. So those calls do happen if they're calling it in for some assistance or they have something like that. But at no time we're not working in operations, with ICE. It's just not happening here. So again, I think it's important that we talk about, Senate Bill 4 and what we all have to work within the law, and we will do that. But also a priority of, it is just not a priority for this department. We do not have the time or the resources, that would require. Just isn't happening.
Do we have any questions from the commission? Comments, questions? Go ahead.
So a process question. I understand in this particular case that got a lot of media attention, it was running a criminal check specifically.
That's right.
What is the routine process during, say, traffic stops or other areas? Is that an area in which these administrative warrants would potentially be encountered under current processes?
So let me back up and say on that particular run with Karen, it was she had called 911, and this was in a short period of time, within a 3-month period, there had been 29 calls to that house, and so a lot of calls for service there, with just a lot of people living in that house and some disagreements going on. So officers had responded over and over to that residence. When she called, she left the line open, and the dispatchers could hear her say, "He has a restraining order. The police are coming." And so at that point, they ran her to see, does she have a restraining order? Because in that background, if I were to run you for, do you have a valid driver's license? Do you have, what's your criminal history? It would also show if you had a existing restraining order. So they saw that she did have an expired restraining order, but it also at that point came up with that she had an administrative warrant, and so that's when it was given over to the officer at that point.
So on a routine traffic stop,
It would come up.
Okay.
Yep. And at the, again, staying within compliance of Senate Bill 4, the general orders, they may call ICE, but they are not required to. And I can tell you the majority of officers in the Austin Police Department are not going to call ICE on an administrative warrant. They're just not. But if they decide to, it will then be brought to a commander's attention, and then we'll be capturing that data as well.
Thank you.
I'm going to take a question, and if there are more, of course. I want to wrap my head around when police officers don't pull background checks, because it's my understanding that these administrative warrants are basically just in the system now. They're in NCIC, and so anytime a police officer pulls a background check, they now don't even have to do an immigration inquiry necessarily. This data is already living in the database. And so I want to wrap my head around instances, because I feel like it's probably more automatic than not for police officers to pull background checks. And so I want to get a better understanding of what their standard operating procedures dictate with regards to when and when they can't pull background checks.
So if it was a call for service and I came to your house and there were 4 people and you were calling about some conflict inside that house, I would probably do a background check on everybody in that house.
Not trying to get away from the specific incidences, because we don't usually deal with specific incidences as a commission. I want to talk about bigger picture.
No, we're not driving around and running license plates to see if there's that's not happening. We're not running into, oh, there's Joe Smith. I know Joe. Oh, let me run him to see have some. That's not happening.
But my question was about policy and whether standard operating procedures actually narrowly define when and when they can't, when they are allowed to pull background checks. That's the question.
Lee, would you know more specific?
It's going to be fact specific based on the call. If we're trying to gather information on who the individual is that we're talking to, information that would be required for a report, obviously on traffic stops when you're determining if somebody has a valid driver's license or not, that's when it's going to be happening. Sometimes there are instances in which you would check a victim. More likely than not, officers would not be just running victims' information, but in the instance that there are instances in which that would occur based on something that the individual would tell you about at the scene.
Right, and I hope you know, I'm not trying to pick apart like it's really trying to, this is me trying to think big picture, and I'm really trying to wrap my head around the scale at which our community's immigration statuses are being accessed by APD on a daily basis. And so that, and I think that's just kind of a big picture, intentional or not. I'm not saying that people are intentionally going in to pull immigration statuses on people, but this is information that lives in the database now. And so I'm just really trying to get an understanding around how much of this information are police officers handling every day. I hope that makes sense.
Well, it does, but I think it's more about, we respond to over, I think within, a month, we over 33,000 calls for service that we respond to as an agency, and that's a great deal of calls for service. And so when you think about opportunities for those calls, yes, that's there. But our orders are specific about our interactions with the public or about calls for service. Are they committing a crime? Is there probable cause for the crime? So it's not that we're going into the HEB parking lot and we're running license plates to see if this then comes up with a immigration warrant.
Do we have any other questions? Yeah, Commissioner Bernhardt.
I just want to clarify, I have 2 questions, but one is the role of the commander. Is that just documentation, or do they have a role in saying
Making the decision, that's right.
Okay.
They will say, we are holding calls for service, we have directed patrols that could be done here.
Right.
This is a priority for this commander in this sector. We do not have the time to wait.
Okay. Okay.
And that will be documented.
Thank you for clarifying that. And then my second question, which is a little bit more big picture and maybe will involve or will require some follow-up. I'm deeply concerned that the perception that APD is referring people to ICE for deportation is going to impact violent crime victims reporting crimes. And I don't know what mechanism we could create to make people safe who want to report a serious violent crime.
Yeah.
Because as you said, APD's #1 goal is crime reduction, and we all know that if there is a serial offender out there who's hurting multiple people, and you're not getting reports from the impacted community, there's no way to deal with that, right?
Right, absolutely, and that's certainly a concern of mine. One of the things we're looking at is how can we be creative with, we know that this is a population that is already under reports crime.
Right.
And so how do we get to a point where they're feeling comfortable to report those crimes? And so as we look at, we have 52 victim service counselors with APD. And so we're very fortunate there. And so can we use the victim services to allow them to touch base with them to report a crime? We're not talking something that just occurred or they need an officer right away, but then could be kind of a third-party intermediary for us. And then the report's taken, and there's a comfort level of knowing that, it's not about immigration status. We're talking about a crime. But I do want you to know as well, the Austin Police Department signs a lot of U visas, more than most major cities in this country. And so when someone reports a crime and they're going to cooperate with that crime, we will sign those U visas. And so I think that is one thing, and I met with Abla, I believe she's here, and some others in the community, just kind of understanding, the leaderships, in that community, what they're wanting to see and wanting to understand the constraints that we have, and then just really be creative in how we can get people to report crime and feel confident knowing that that immigration status isn't going to be, what our aim is at all.
Just a quick follow-up. Would it be possible for folks to report crime at a third location, right? Like at a cooperating nonprofit or someplace that they might feel safe?
So I think that's something that we're going to look at. Okay. I mean, we're open to that, and I think it's just the conversations are just starting. But again, I think there's got to be a point, our APD victim services, they are employees, and so they already work with law enforcement, and so there might be a comfort level already there. But we are open to being creative on how we can get people to report these crimes.
Yeah. I didn't mean who was reporting, I just meant where.
Mm-hmm. Got it.
Thanks.
Thanks for being here, Chief. A first question of a couple that I have. Can you give an overview of your knowledge of the number, the scope of agents that have current operations happening right now in the city of Austin, their timeline, anything like that?
I cannot.
Okay.
Nope.
Does the Austin Police Department...
It's because I'm not told that. It's not that I don't know that. I'm not told those things.
Thank you. Does the Austin Police Department have any plans to institute a policy that would require a duty to intervene if APD were to witness what they believe reasonably to be the violation of someone's constitutional rights by ICE?
Yeah, I think it's an interesting, when you're looking across the country, certainly, and listening to the speaker, understanding, and you're looking at what other cities are doing, is it documenting where we're seeing these, crimes? That's a conversation that the executive staff and I have to have. I think that would be a route we'd go, where we're documenting some of these, allegations. That would probably be the best way to go. But this is, we're all in new uncharted territory here, and so I think it's about getting our heads wrapped around, where we go, and talking to the executive staff on how we do that. Because at the end of the day, we are the local law enforcement, and we are, that's what our role is to serve and protect here.
There are constitutional protections against unreasonable detentions. Part of that calculus is the length of those detentions. Other states in the past, notably Arizona, have navigated similar considerations around cooperation with federal law enforcement. Does the APD have any plans to put into policy specific limitations on what they define as a reasonable length of detention in cooperation with ICE as part of SB 4?
I honestly think that I'm better off with leaving it in the commander's hands, because reasonable to me is the fact that we're 300 officers short, and reasonable to me is that I have directed patrols in hotspot locations that need an officer's attention there, and so that's reasonable to me, is to think about our calls for service, our officers in their own districts, patrolling around their own areas. That's more reasonable to me.
So there is no plan currently to set any department-wide
I'm not going to
standard?
say I'm going to wait. This is the thing. Am I going to open myself up and say I'm going to wait 20 minutes and someone's 25 minutes away, 20 minutes away? To me, the reasonableness is that I'm over 300 officers short, and I don't have time to wait on a civil detainer this time, just because of the resources that we have, or the lack of resources that we have.
Thank you. My last question. This, I think, dovetails with earlier questions from the commissioners. Does the APD currently have or plan to codify any circumstances in which officers will not search for background information of victims, suspects, or any circumstances in which they would not use information to which they are privy in the course of their normal investigations?
Well, I can tell you they do that every day. Believe me, there are people on 33,000 calls for service in a month that they're running and they see an administrative warrant and they're not calling ICE. That's already happening. And so we could go, to go back through all those runs and see, was this person Is that something we want to do? I don't know. But like I said, that is something we do daily.
To be clear, Chief, my question was, is there a plan to implement a policy that would
No.
restrict on when that would happen, or this will continue to be something left entirely to the discretion of officers?
I think at this point, there is no plan to do that.
Thank you, Chief.
Yeah.
I think I have one final question, and it's just with the idea that there is no time to wait. You guys have other priorities. You need to answer other calls. There's no time to sit around and wait for ICE. And this is a bit of a scenario walkthrough. A police officer calls ICE. It's happened. They have informed, they have not, according to how the policy seems like it's laid out now, they have made the call to ICE because we're not allowed to interfere with their ability to do that because of SB4 in any way, shape, or form. So they've now called ICE. They've called the supervisor. The supervisor says, we don't have time to sit around and wait. And so does that police officer and supervisor now leave the scene?
Yes.
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 And,
The final determination
and
is
there
with the commander.
And I'm just trying to listen to everything
Sure.
that's happening. And we're talking about violation of people's rights when ICE arrives. So now there is no police officer on scene to ensure the safety of the person that was the person that's left behind for ICE to come find.
And that person doesn't have to stay there.
I know, but
That is right. You're
but
right.
yes.
That's right.
Okay, so that means APD is leaving the scene, and
After
there's no longer.
calling ICE, yes, they are leaving the scene.
Okay.
When it comes to a commander.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. Oh, Commissioner Smith. Sorry.
And just a follow-up on that, because you said earlier, in regards to APD being the shield between potentially a civilian's rights being agreed by ICE in that circumstance, I believe the wording was document the allegations. And from the chair's just her scenario she just pointed out, if the APD officer, if the APD officer witnesses the infringement of rights, if the APD officer witnesses ICE rolling up and beating someone to a point where it is over and above what is necessary to eliminate a potential threat, is it in your reformed or in your guidance that they step up and protect the individual? Because I haven't heard that part. I just want to make crystal clear I'm understanding correctly what your guidance is to one of our officers if they witness an attack on a civilian.
Yeah, well, we could sit and go through scenarios, but I think as I'm looking at ICE's presence here in Austin, the thing that I have to do is it's not collaboration, but it's sit at the table with DHS and ICE and talk about, again, they're not telling us where they are. Now, if we call and say, we've gotten calls that you're here, are you here? So we are not being called to come and actively do operations with ICE. But to your point, if officers are witnessing something and they witness what they feel is an excessive use of force, I would hope that they would step in. But again, this executive staff and I have to look at what does that look like as far as documentation or how we're going to move forward or what that would all look like.
Okay. Do we have any other questions? Thank you. Oh, of course.
And Chief, will you be able to come back to the commission once you've reviewed that notion of whether or not you will make that policy for your officers to step in when they witness? Kind of as a follow-up to Commissioner.
I'll be here in March for the March meeting. And so, talking to City Legal and talking to others in the executive staff, we could speak more on it. Okay.
And then just for everybody watching at home and in the crowd, the plan and as of that I was aware of in March was that at that point we would actually review the new general orders and policy that is finalized by APD. So we'll have a conversation about that in the first week of March.
Thank you for taking number 5 higher. I appreciate you. Thank you.
Thank
you all.
We also have a recommendation. So I think I'm going to leave our recommendation. I want us to kind of think a little bit about what we just heard and give commissioners a chance to look at the recommendation and see if there's any additional revisions we want to make before we put that up. So I'm going to go ahead and move forward with other items and try to get back to sort of some semblance of